All right. Hello, everyone. We are here to discuss seller disclosures. And I have kind of a special treat for you a little bit this today because I have not only am I going to go over seller disclosures, but I've also made instructions for you on how to fill things out and stuff like that. So, what we're going to do is, sorry, didn't mean to do that there, is we're going to talk about the seller disclosures. So, as we hop into this, a couple of quick little notes. The seller disclosures are to be filled out by the seller. So just a couple of quick things at the top. It says this form only applies to residential real estate sales and purchases. It is not required for residential purchases of a new construction. So if it's a brand new home, you will not have seller disclosures. A sale of a real estate at auction, you will not have seller disclosures. Or if you have a court supervised foreclosure, you will not have seller disclosures. Also, keep in mind what is considered a residential property, which is something with 1 to 3 units. So if you have a fourplex, for example, that will not have seller disclosures. A duplex should have seller disclosures because that is considered residential real estate. So it goes on to say here in this paragraph that as the seller, you are asked to disclose what you know about the property. Your answers to the questions form must be filled out based on your knowledge of the property you are selling, however and whenever you gain that knowledge. Please take your time to answer these questions accurately and completely. So this is something that I see a lot of sellers don't quite understand is if they know that the previous owner put on a roof in 2010, they need to disclose the age of that roof to the best of their knowledge. So when they go down to, using this just as an example, when they go down to the roof section, have you ever had the roof replaced? Well, they have not had the roof replaced, so they would check no. But inside of here and further notice, you could put per previous owner, roof was replaced in 2010. So the key in all of this is it is the answers to your questions is formed to based on the best of your knowledge for the property you're selling, however and whenever you gain that knowledge. Okay. So just a key piece that I like to point out to everybody. Other than that, of course, the property address is going to go in the city, the state, and the zip, and it goes on to tell you the purpose of this disclosure form. So you can read through this, but basically it says this disclosure is based on the seller's knowledge of the property condition and however that knowledge is gained. The disclosure does not warranty by either the seller or the real estate agent as a substitution for inspection or a warranty that the purchaser may wish to obtain. This form is a statement of conditions and other information about the property known by the seller, unless otherwise advised. The seller does not possess any expertise in construction, architecture, engineering, or specific areas related to the construction or condition of the property or the improvements on it. Unless otherwise stated, the seller has not conducted any inspection of generally inaccessible areas such as the foundation or roof. The buyer is encouraged to obtain his or her own professional inspections. So that just goes to say, hey, the seller is going to give you as much information as they know about the house. However, this is not a substitute for the buyer doing their own due diligence. Also, the seller, short of being a licensed contractor, does not have the technical knowledge to be able to assess any potential issues and may not have even been in certain areas of the house. How many of you actually go into your attic or the crawl space of your home, for example? So just outlining a couple things. Then it says instructions to the seller. You can read through this. What ultimately it says is that the seller is the one to fill this out. Number one, it has to be truthful. They have to tell the truth inside of this. They have to report any conditions that affect the property, regardless of how you know about them. Even if it's a previous person or a contractor told you didn't learn it yourself, you still have to disclose it. Attach any additional pages when necessary with your signature, date, and time of signing. So if they do, I see this a lot when there's a list of updates done to the property, they'll attach an additional page. They do need to sign an initial date and time, that as well. And then they either complete this form themselves or give authorization to the end at the end of this form for somebody else to complete it. We're going to talk about what that looks like as well. And number 5 is if an item does not apply to the property, mark not applicable. And number 6, if you truly do not know the answer to the question, mark unknown. Mark Gibbs, did you have a question there?
No.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I thought I saw you come off mute, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay. All right. So the seller is going to go through and fill this form out. Basically, on each line item, they have a couple of different options. So have they ever lived in the home? If yes, please indicate the length of time. Now on each line, regardless of what it says, they have following options. NA means this does not apply, meaning, let's scroll down here. Let's just say security system. There is no security system in the home. They would mark NA because that does not apply to this particular home. The other option is yes. So if they've had, using this section here, if they've had an issue or state whether there have been problems affecting the plumbing, if they had a plumbing leak, no matter how big or how small, at any point, or they know of one at a previous time, they would check yes. And then I always use the line or the further explanation down here in this box to explain what. So for example, kitchen sink faucet leaked in 2010, repaired by plumber. If they had no issues, or they don't know of any issues, at least, they would mark no. And then if it's unknown, meaning we've never checked it, we've never maybe lived in the property, anything along those lines, then they would check unknown. I see a lot of people get confused between the unknown and the NA. Unknown means you truly don't know for certain whether or not there's a problem. NA means this does not apply to this particular house, this topic or question from there. Couple other key points before we get into the actual instructions that I typed up for you. Heating and cooling, it will ask you the age of the systems. If you don't know, write unknown. If they do know, they can put that in here. They can also estimate time frame. So say they think it was 2014, but they're not sure. They could even write in estimated 2014. So you always want to disclose as much information as possible, of course. Then one other part that I know kind of confuses people is when we get down to the sewer system here, they are going to check one of these. Means the property is serviced by either public municipal treatment use facility. So this is typically like in town, think like OMU or somebody like that. And then if that's what happens, they check yes here and NA for all of these other categories through the 7 categories. If it's maybe on septic, then they would check NA for public, and then they would come down to septic tank with a drain field or septic tank with offsite cluster system, and they would check yes for one of those. So this top part is just asking how is your sewer set up? Then you would give the name of the servicer. So for example, OMU, for example, who services your septic. And if it is septic or in sewer, when was the last time you had it inspected, if inspected? And then normal questions like, are you aware of any issues from there? Then we would continue down. They would continue just to work their way through answering all the questions, again, to the best of their knowledge. There is a space for additional information, a bigger space here, where a lot of people will use this if they, again, have updates and things like that, or maybe there's a lot of line items that they've had repaired. Maybe it's a flip home, or maybe they've just done a lot of work to the home. A lot of times they'll list here. Next part is who's filling out the form. If the seller fills the form out, they check this box and it says that they certify that all the information is accurate to the best of their knowledge, and then they would sign and date here. If they did not fill out the form, but they had the real estate agent completed the form based on their information, which means they're answering the questions, but the agent is the one physically filling out the form, then that's going to be box number 2. So you would check this box and then the sellers would sign here. If the sellers refuse to fill out the form completely, they would check this box and then sign here. And if this part is they refuse to fill out the form and they allow the real estate agent to inform the buyer that, hey, we're not filling this form out. That's the 3rd section. 4th section is the seller refuses to complete the form and doesn't even acknowledge such refusal. A lot of times you'll see this in a foreclosure property, even though it says up top that this form isn't required to be filled out, but it does have here. And then the real estate agent needs to sign. So basically they're saying, hey, I'm not filling this out, I'm not signing anything saying I'm not going to fill it out, in which case the agent would sign. So you have a record of that. And then once the buyer reviews it, there's a space for the buyer to sign, of course. So that's the form in general. But what I really wanted to go over today, because I think this would be really beneficial for everybody, is I made these agent instructions on how to handle the seller disclosure form. So this will be emailed out to you with all of the proper forms as well. And it says, what is your role, including what are the KRS and KREC regulations, including the KRS statutes. So what can you do? You can provide the form to the seller. You can explain the purpose and legal requirement to fill out the form. You can deliver the completed form to a buyer's or buyer's agent. You can assist in organizing the attachments seller needs and helping add in documentation. So you can take the seller disclosures and combine it with a home inspection report, for example. You can complete the form on behalf of the seller only if they give written authorization to do so, and that is in that bottom section as well. I just realized you are not following up. I'm not sharing the right screen. 1 second here. Agent instructions. Here we go. So this is the form that I ended up making for you. Zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little easier. There we go. Okay. So again, you can see here that I'm just going line by line through these items. So they can fill out the bottom section if they give you permission to be able to do it. It does have to be in writing, or they can inform the buyer in writing if the seller refuses to complete the form. What you cannot do, you cannot fill out the form without seller's written permission. This is a clear violation of state statute, and you will get in trouble, potentially even losing your license. You cannot guess or assume answers for the seller. So if they don't know, if they think their property lines are marked by the fence, or the property lines are the fences, but they aren't for sure, you can't say, well, let's just assume that it is the fences, mark yes, just as an example. You cannot leave out known changes to the property condition. This is something that I don't think is fully understood, is if something changes. Let's say you list the house and for whatever reason there's a plumbing leak and they have to replace their water heater while the home is listed, before any buyer ever even sees it or writes an offer. You have to update this form. If you have it under contract and something happens, and again, a water heater goes bad and you have to replace the water heater, you have to update this form, and the buyer now needs to re-sign it. So anytime new information is given, this form must be updated. Also, if a seller fills out this form, buyer, ends up making an offer, they reach an agreement, buyer gets a home inspection, they ask for repairs, for whatever reason, the deal falls apart, but the home inspection is now shared with the seller. Well, guess what? They now have knowledge of everything that's wrong with that home. Now this needs to be added to the seller disclosures. Best way to do that would be go to the page 4 and put in the further conditions, see attached home inspection report from date blank. And then I would list out what's been repaired, and then you just attach the home inspection report as part of the seller disclosure. So you don't have to physically write everything out, but the information must be presented. Also, you cannot use the disclosure as a substitute for inspections. The form is not a warranty or a home inspection report. And then best practices are to review the form line by line to ensure they understand each question. Now, this is crucial. You cannot give them answers, but you can make sure they understand what is being asked. You can encourage full and honest disclosure. And then, of course, you keep a copy of the completed form plus any changes that end up being made prior to closing, as well as all signatures from both buyer and seller. And if the seller refuses to complete or sign the form, document it thoroughly and notify all parties, including getting the last page signed where it says that they not only will not fill it out, but they won't even sign to acknowledge that they won't fill it out. So simple instructions, but a really great reminder. The other thing that we have is, let me switch screens here. There we go. So I also have seller instructions. So these are a lot more simple, but you can see here it's seller instructions on how to handle the seller disclosures form. Number 1, answer every question to the best of your knowledge. The recap on what we started with. If it doesn't apply, mark NA. If you don't know the answer, it's unknown. If the answer is yes, provide a brief explanation. Be honest and thorough. Even if the issue has been fixed, it must be disclosed. If you're unsure how to answer, ask your agent, but don't guess. Agents do not provide answers. You can't advise them on whether or not they should basically disclose something, and the answer is always yes, you should. Or if they don't understand what a question's asking, you can help interpret that. Attach any helpful documents, so any inspection reports, repair invoices, surveys, warranties, or anything else. You can update the form if something changes before closing. If anything new happens, like a leak or repair, notify your agent or buyer in writing. You can sign and date the appropriate certification at the bottom. So either the seller filled it out themselves or the other 4 options that we already went over. And then a quick little what not to do and why not to do it at the bottom. Don't leave anything out on purpose. That can lead to legal issues. Don't let your agent fill it out unless you give permission, because they're not allowed to do so without written authorization. And don't use this form instead of a home inspection, because buyers are still encouraged to get a home inspection. It's really more of a buyer instruction, but letting the seller know that this is not a substitute for a buyer's inspection, and buyers ultimately still have the right to get homes inspected. So one other thing really quick that I wanted to go over, because I get asked this question a lot. Let me reshare the seller disclosures 1 second. So if you've paid any attention, whether you're on live with me or you're watching online, down at the bottom, you ultimately will get somebody who fills this form out that says something to the effect of seller has never lived in the home and doesn't warranty the condition of the property. I try to get people to understand. I see investors do this a lot on flip homes. I used to before I was educated in it. If the investor knows stuff about the property, meaning they hired a contractor to replace the roof, they now know the age of that roof. They need to put this on that form. Filling this out and saying that I don't know any information about the property when you actually do is a clear violation of what this form says. Because you remember up at the top, it says your answers to the question in this form must be based on the best of your knowledge of the property you're selling, however and whenever you gain this knowledge. So granted, you may not have ever lived in the home, but if you know that the kitchen's been remodeled, that the roof has been replaced, that the bathroom's been remodeled, that floors were leveled out, or that there was an issue with X, Y, Z, and A, B, C, and 1, 2, 3, you still need to disclose these. And as a buyer's agent who's representing a buyer in this transaction, if I see that somebody puts on there that sellers never lived in the home, makes no warranties of the condition of the home, then I'm challenging that. And especially if I know it's a home that has been invested and flipped or something along, or just rehabbed, and I'm challenging that and making sure that all the information goes in there as possible. Because again, this should be presented to the buyers prior to ever writing an offer, and is really the tool that helps them understand the condition of the property before actually making that offer. And a lot of times buyers are making offers based off of not only the home itself and what they feel like it's worth and the condition, location, price, and all those things, but also the material facts that have been disclosed to them. And the greatest part of the material fact is the seller disclosures. So again, we're going to email you out copies of the seller disclosures, including both the agent instructions and the seller instructions. So that way you'll have that as tools in your toolkit to be able to best facilitate your transactions. But other than that, I'm going to end the recording, and then if we have any questions, we'll go from there. 1 second.